Welcome to Audible Stories. The Miracles. Once upon a time in a village a young man was bragging as usual, but this time he was bragging directly to God. "They say you can do miracles," the young man boasted, "but you are not alone. I too can do miracles." God was amused. "What sort of miracles can you do?" The man chuckled. "Give me a corn cob, and I'll get, in exchange, 100 soldiers." Now God had grown weary of his idle boasts, and so, seeing no harm in this challenge, God gave him a corn cob. "Let us see your miracle," God said. "Just wait and watch," he promised. "I'll return in 1 week's time with 100 soldiers for you." "I don't want your soldiers," God said, "but do what you will and do it on your own." "You have 1 week then." Now everyone in the village knows about this man who always boasts and brags as a trickster, but everyone also knows it is impossible to turn a corncob into 100 soldiers. The villagers laughed when they heard about his boast. But the young man had a plan. He took his corncob and set off on a journey. The first night, he stopped at an inn and said to the innkeeper, "Do you see this corncob?" "Of course I do," the innkeeper replied. "This is a sacred corncob," he said. "It belongs to God. No one must ever touch it." The innkeeper gave him his own private room, for he did not wish to risk having someone steal God's corncob. In the middle of the night, this young man sneaked out of his room and took the corncob out to the chicken coop, where he broke the kernels from the cob and scattered them on the ground for the chickens to find at dawn. In the morning, when he was awoke, he said to the innkeeper, "Someone has stolen my corncob. Come look, it is gone." Well, of course the corncob was gone, and when he saw kernels upon the ground around the chicken coop and the empty corncob, he chided the innkeeper. "Someone has stolen God's corn and fed it to the chickens. You will surely have to pay for this," he said sternly, shaking the empty corncob at the innkeeper. Quaking, the innkeeper said, "Please, let me try to make it up to you." For his troubles, he gave him his biggest, fattest chicken. "Please tell God I offer this chicken in payment for the sacred corncob. And please beg for my forgiveness." He told the innkeeper he would do his best to argue the case, and off he went. That night he stopped at a second inn, and there he told the innkeeper that his chicken was a sacred chicken. "It belongs to God," he said. "No one must touch it." Here again the innkeeper made certain to give him a private room, but in the middle of the night, the young man awoke and killed the chicken, and he placed the creature outside the innkeeper's door. In the morning, when the young man saw the chicken outside the innkeeper's door, he began to wail. "You are in big trouble, man," he said to the innkeeper. "I told you the chicken was sacred." The innkeeper was terrified. "Please, let me repay God," he said, and he offered him a dozen of his finest sheep. "All right, I'll take them and see what I can do," he said, and off he set, leading his dozen sheep behind him. As he was traveling along, he came upon a burial ceremony. Several men were carrying the body of a traveler who had been found beside the road. Since they didn't know where the traveler had came from, they were going to bury him at a local site. "Please," the young man said, I shall trade you my dozen sheep for this body, for I believe I know where the traveler had came from." The burial priest quickly agreed and made the trade. Now he traveled with the body to a faraway village. "I have brought with me the child of God," he announced as he entered the village. "Quiet, please. God's child is sleeping peacefully. No one dared touch and disturb this young man." One kind innkeeper gave him a large and luxurious room to share with the child of God, but in the middle of the night, he moved the body down to the main entrance. In the morning, he raced downstairs, crying and shouting, "Where has the God's child gone?" Everyone woke and came to see what was the trouble, and now they saw him weeping and wailing over the body that lay outside the innkeeper's door. "Someone in this village has killed God's child," he cried, and the village doctor came to have a look. "It is true," the doctor said sadly. "The God's child is dead." The people were terrified of God's wrath and anger. "What can we do now?" they asked the young man, for he seemed to be a wise man. "Give me 100 of your young men to serve as soldiers for God," he said, and the villagers reluctantly agreed and did just that. So the young returned to his own village leading 100 soldiers of God behind him. And once again he proved he was among the world's finest tricksters, and so, he again boasted and said to God, "You see, I have done a miracle in front of you within a week's time." But God knew perfectly well that, without his help and support, he won't be able to do a miracle. God asked him, "Did you do this miracle on your own, or you had to do this in my name?" Now the young man agreed that every time whenever he traded the corn cob, a chicken, and sheeps and the dead body, he had to take God's name to fulfill and settle the trade. And so he realized and understood that it's only the God who can do miracles, for a man is totally and completely dependent on the good God's will. If you like the story, please do like, share and subscribe. Thank you for listening.